What's up, everybody? SEC meetings get underway in Destin today. What did Greg Sankey have to say last night about what is going to happen this week? Injury reports, could they be coming to the SEC? Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along on today's show. We'll discuss what Greg Sankey had to say. We'll get to some SEC baseball nuggets as they make history. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Today's make every moment more with FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. All right, SEC meetings down in Destin getting underway today. And while we wait to see what the biggest storylines are to come out of this week, we did hear from SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey, who spoke with reporters on Monday evening in Destin as things kick off. And among the things that Greg Sankey discussed, well, first things first, how about an injury report, or as they call it, an SEC player availability report? Greg Sankey addressing an issue that the league will be discussing throughout this week, player availability reporting. It is a project that some staff members have been working on since last summer, but Sankey said no final decisions are expected to be made on that this week, saying, quote, "We don't want to just rush into something. It's not injury reporting. It's a very different circumstance given some of the privacy issues we have. Yet when you start to see the numbers of dollars being bet on legalized sports gambling around college sports, not just football, but men's and women's basketball, volleyball, baseball, all of those catch your attention." And I'll just say Greg Sankey. I don't know many people betting on college volleyball, but I digress. He went on to say we have to be thoughtful about how information is managed. This is very interesting because college coaches are always so very secretive, right? They never want to give out anything about injuries. A lot of them sidestep everything, when it comes to injuries. And Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports tweeting, he said, Greg Sankey says the SEC will hold those conversations this week about the possible implementation of college football availability reports leading up to games. And even Ross said the old injury report thing might finally happen. Again, they could say all they want. We're not going to call them injury reports, player availability report. Come on. Brian Kelly even talked about that during LSU spring practices. He brought up that they would start implementing that, basically saying, this guy was available, this guy was limited, kind of like that. We see that across professional sports where a guy, NFL, this guy was limited on one day, did not practice Tuesday, returned to practice Wednesday, that kind of stuff. But the Big Ten is leading the charge here. The SEC may soon follow the Big Ten's lead and begin providing those player availability reports. Again, Sankey saying discussions with the SEC senior leadership started last year and will expand to include coaches and athletic directors this week. One more note on this. Greg Sankey was asked a question about prop betting on college sports, and he said there would be a conversation about it. Yeah, I mean, look, if you're betting on, hey, I got the over 300 yards passing this week with Carson Beck, and he didn't practice on Monday or Tuesday, how about a status report Wednesday or Thursday? Is he limited? Is he still out? It would be nice to know that for sports bettors out there. It's a very interesting thing. Like, does the SEC owe that to sports, bettors out there? Granted, a lot of them are fans. Sports betting is not taboo anymore. It is legal in a lot of states. Go check out our buddies at FanDuel. This is going to be very interesting to see how this evolves, because it is, it's going to be very interesting. You're doing pro sports, and now it could be coming to college. And I just can't wait to see these college coaches have to get up there and be like, yeah, here's our injury report for today. There are just so many of them want to keep everything under wraps. And look, it's a competitive advantage. If your starting quarterback might not play Saturday, why let everybody know? Keep that a secret. Let the opponent find that out on Saturday. But I get it. I get why it's happening. All right, another big topic from recent years at SEC meetings, scheduling. And it sounds like that will not be a topic this week. The SEC still has a decision to make on whether they will move from an 8-game to 9-game conference schedule in football starting in 2026, but they will not make that decision this week. Greg Sankey saying the fallout from the House settlement is going to dominate much of the conversations this week. More on that in a little bit, but Jesse Simonton of On3 Sports confirming Greg Sankey said they do not expect the SEC's 2026 and beyond football scheduling to be discussed this week at the spring meetings. I mean, the reality is they've already made a decision on next year's schedule in 2025. It's going to be your 2024 opponents again, but just home and away flipped. And as much as I'm not a fan of that, I do think we need to have a little bit more of a spreading things out. You know, teams that had a easy schedule this year are going to wind up with an easy schedule again next year. Teams that had a hard schedule this year, still going to be a hard schedule next year. And, you know, it's some of those games like, all right, you play Georgia. Playing Georgia home or away is still a tough game. It's not like it gets easier next year because you get them at home. It's still going to be a brutal game to play. So I just I want more parity, and I want more, you know, equal more equality when it comes to opponents, a balanced schedule. Some years you have a tough schedule, some years you have a hard schedule. But mostly I want you to be, you know, a mix to happen where you play everybody in the conference in their home stadium or in your stadium once every 4 years. And again, that was the proposal of going to a 9-game conference schedule. You keep your 3 permanents. We preserve all the precious rivalries. But we also get an even rotation of getting every opponent. But fortunately, we're going to have to wait 2 more years to possibly see that come to fruition. Maybe. All right, another thing Greg Sankey discussed this week, or that will be on the docket this week at the SEC meetings in Destin, the Jaden Rashada lawsuit versus Billy Napier and others connected to Florida. Sankey weighed in for the first time Monday on that bombshell Jaden Rashada lawsuit, of course, accusing Billy Napier, his former, scouting assistant, others over a failed, or accused them of fraud over a failed $13.8 million name, image, and likeness deal. Napier has yet to publicly comment on the lawsuit himself. And Greg Sankey, joking, quote, "I'm not a fan of lawsuits. That's what I think." Of course, the now Georgia quarterback, Jaden Rashada, filed the lawsuit last week in federal court, accusing Napier, booster Hugh Hathcock, and Florida staffer Marcus Castro-Walker of fraudulently inducing him to pass up on an alleged $9.5 million NIL deal with Miami to sign with Florida for a $13.85 million promise with no intention of them following through on those payments. Greg Sankey went on to say, not the only lawsuit involving a coach over the last year, won't be the last. We have a legal system. People have a right to pursue what they view as grievances, and the legal system serves that out. I get what Sankey's saying, but also this is a pretty damn big deal. I mean, this is the first time of this fruition of the, NIL era where you're having a lawsuit from a guy who's, was going to be an SEC player, wasn't, and now is an SEC player at a different school filing a lawsuit. So I do think Greg Sankey kind of owes it to comment a little bit more on that, but we shall see what happens with that. All right, we got plenty more to get into on comments from Greg Sankey down in Destin. Thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we'll touch on more of what Greg Sankey had to say in just a sec. But first, this episode is presented by our friends over at FanDuel. It is winner take all over at FanDuel, and it's winner take all in the NBA and NHL. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers, if you've never signed up with FanDuel before, you get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is $150 To bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more, go visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. Again, they got all the action each and every night. Even if you just want to do Major League Baseball, they got all the games up there. NBA, NHL playoffs, all of it there for you, and even some early college football betting lines. I think they've got some of the week 1 games up there still, the over and under on some of the win totals for SEC teams. A lot of that stuff is up there for you, some prop bets as well. Go check them out. It is FanDuel. Again, that website, FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's going to get you that special $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. They are FanDuel, and they are America's #1 sportsbook. All right, roll along here, Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. Keep coming back and checking us out. And hey, check out our friends over at Locked On Sports Today, streaming for you 24/7, covering all the big sports topics of the day. Locked On Sports Today. All right, as we dive back into what Greg Sankey had to say Monday evening, getting started with the SEC meetings down in Destin. Kind of surprised. There was not much mention of the 2 newest members in Texas and Oklahoma. You'd think that'd be the biggest storyline. My God, 2 huge brands like this making their debut. I get they haven't officially joined. That's coming, July 1st? But obviously representatives from Texas and Oklahoma out there, media members from Texas and Oklahoma out there. Greg Sankey did say in his opening statement, he said it's been nearly 3 years since we came to the announcement of the growth to a 16-team league. If you go back to August of 2021, shortly after that announcement was made, we began inviting both ADs to join our ADs meetings, first remotely and then in person, with Joe Castiglione from Oklahoma and Chris Del Conte from Texas. He said fast forward to last year in Destin, we had the 2 school presidents. They began meeting with our presidents and chancellors, and they've been active since that time. We expect they'll both have a full Destin contingent with head coaches, faculty reps, communication directors, senior administrators here this week. And as a sign, we're about to end one chapter and begin another. But that was kind of it. The only other reference he made to it was he said he was officially retiring his 14-team SEC belt. He has a belt with all the school logos across it. And he said, it's time for a new one. He noted that 8 years ago, he said, the times, they are changing. Well, that was the understatement of the decade. And yeah, there's been a lot changing. Other news and notes from what Greg Sankey had to say down there in Destin on Monday with the start of SEC meetings getting underway. And one of the other tidbits, kick times. This Thursday, the SEC will release kickoff times and TV networks for several games in the first 3 weeks of the football season. He said there will be some other games in there and a few surprises probably for the season ahead. Some matchups will remain off limits as part of a 6 and 12-day window selection to best feature the high-profile games. But the entire early window kickoff games, 11 a.m. through noon, will be revealed by mid-June, Sankey said. That'll be a change from past practices as the SEC begins its first year under a single media agreement with Disney rather than with CBS and Disney. He said the league is acting more intentional and out ahead of kickoff time announcements for fans. Again, those 6-day and 12-day windows aren't totally going away, but any games that might be flexed only have the afternoon and evening windows as options. Fans will have a great sense on if their team is playing any 11 a.m. games this summer. This is big because, again, like it used to always be you had to wait. CBS had their first draft pick, if you would. You know, they would decide, oh, we're going to take that game. That's going to be the 2:30 Central, 3:30 Eastern game coming up in 2 weeks. And then, and then everything would fall in line. ESPN would think, oh, okay, we'll take that game that night. The SEC network would go, we'll take that game. It's our primetime game that night. And, and then somebody, if it was Vanderbilt, South Carolina, all right, you guys get the 11 a.m. Central, 12 Eastern game. Well, I like this. They're going to announce all of those games by mid-June. And let's be real. We kind of know, look at your schedule. You can kind of figure out what games are up for that 11 a.m. Central, 12 noon Eastern kickoff times. Let's say if you're Georgia and you're playing Vanderbilt, that's probably in that possibility. If you're Texas playing, I don't know, South Carolina, maybe that one's up for it. Just throwing out there some hypotheticals. I'm not trying to just pick on Vanderbilt here, but you get it. Mississippi State versus A&M. That's probably an 11 a.m. Central kick. Just putting some examples out there, but cool that we'll know those ahead of time, and honestly makes for better planning purposes for a fan. Like, you can already look at the schedule and go, oh, good. Well, so-and-so's getting married that night. We can still make the wedding. It's going to be an early game that day. Just planning purposes, traveling, tailgating, all that stuff. It matters. If you know you're going to go to a destination and it's going to be one of those early morning kickoffs, well, maybe you change your flight. Instead of flying out Friday, maybe you fly out Thursday to spend an extra day in a college town maybe you haven't visited yet. So I think that part is kind of cool. One last thing here on what Greg Sankey discussed last night. Of course, he was asked about the landmark settlement in the House versus NCAA case, the $2.8 billion settlement announced last week. And publicly, the time to begin formulating resolutions based on the settlement terms begins this week. Brandon Marcello and John Talty of CBS Sports writing, Greg Sankey said, I anticipate plenty of conversation here with our leadership about what all this means for our own decision-making. We have the opportunity to play an important role in our own decision-making about the future, as opposed to leaving that to the court system. Now, he did say that he's been to D.C. a lot, and he still favors, Congress making a national guideline for all of schools to follow rather than just taking it state by state. I think a lot of us always say we don't want Congress involved in anything, leave college sports alone. But Greg Sankey said, look, I've not had a student athlete come to me and say, I want to be taxed like an employee. There are those who advocate for that reality. Takes me back to a fundamental statement, which is there's no better time to be a student athlete than right now in the history of college sports. No better time. I get what Sankey's saying there, but also, look, students who have NIL deals are still paying taxes on that. So whether they became state employees or employees of the university, whatever it is, I mean, they're going to pay tax. They're going to get taxed no matter what. We're talking about them getting paid. It's just what route are we going to go? And obviously, what's coming in the works here down the pike, most possibly as early as next year, is schools having basically a $22 million spending budget or salary cap, if you will, that they can pay the players. And how do you divvy that up? And is it just football, dude? Does it go amongst all the other sports, all that kind of stuff? But Sankey's saying, look, we need national standards for all this, and that's the role I think Congress can play. As for how a revenue sharing model should be structured, Sankey didn't share any ideas, just said our trends have been to provide some equity. This is a very different world. I expect we will elicit opinions, perspectives, and we have time to learn those perspectives, and then we're going to have to work through all that, what that means from a decision-making standpoint. Now, can the NCAA's desire to develop stronger rules governing NIL have teeth? Should collectives still exist in this new model? All Greg Sankey said is, we'll see. What about unlimited scholarships outlined in the settlement? Remember, Yahoo Sports reported a roster limit of 85 players, all on scholarship, and you can eliminate all walk-ons or, use some of the budget to pay the walk-ons. And there's going to be a lot of discussion about that. Greg Sankey said, I have not talked to our coaches about that other than individually say, hey, slow down, guys. He said, I think it's a bit of a threat, a danger that we can't have a conversation about concepts that don't populate themselves outside the room. So then that provokes a reaction. I know other conferences have discussed it. Coaches have texted other coaches. They get fired up. And we just said, just wait. We're going to have a conversation. And that's where that is. So, I mean, look, rightfully so. You get it. Coaches are, all this stuff is changing on a daily basis for them. And they're trying to figure out, where is this all going to be in a year from now? Offering scholarships, putting together a roster for next year, who's coming back, who's entering the transfer portal, who's under scholarship, who's not, who's getting payment from the revenue sharing from the school, who's not. There's a lot of stuff going on here. All right, still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We'll keep you up to date with all the biggest stories coming out of Destin as the week rolls along. But when we return here, we do need to discuss the SEC making history in the NCAA baseball tournament. That is coming your way here in just a second. All right, roll along here to Locked On SEC. And how about the NCAA baseball tournament getting underway this week? And on Monday, the full bracket and seedings for the regional round came out. And the SEC continues to dominate the baseball picture. They had the top 3 overall seeds in the tournament and 5 of the top 8 national seeds who will receive home field advantage throughout the super regional round if they advance. Here's how it shook out. Tennessee is the number 1 seed in the country for the second time in program history. Kentucky, A&M, Arkansas, and Georgia are the other SEC programs with the top 8 seed. The ACC claimed the other 3 seeds in the top 8, with Clemson, North Carolina, and Florida State rounding out that side. Overall, the SEC set a record with 11 regional teams. That includes a record for 5 teams within the top 8 national seeds. The ACC tied the SEC's mark of 5 regional host sites and sent 8 teams to the final field. As for the schedule, a regional round will be double elimination games played from Friday through Monday. If needed, winners of the regional will advance to the super regional, and that'll be a best of 3. And as you guys know, super regionals will be played starting June 7th, and you'll either play Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or you'll play Saturday, Sunday, Monday. The 8 super regional winners will advance to the Men's College World Series. Of course, that'll be up in Omaha, Charles Schwab Field, and that will get underway Friday, June 14th. So here's how it shakes out. Number 1 overall seed is Tennessee in the Knoxville Regional. They will host Northern Kentucky, Indiana, and Southern Miss. Then we have the number 2 overall seed. That is Kentucky. That's the Lexington Regional. They will host Western Michigan, Illinois, and Indiana State. So I think 2 doable regionals there. I know Southern Miss is typically a pretty good school, but I like the draw there for Tennessee. I like the draw there for Kentucky. I think both of them have a good chance, if any, to come out of those. Coming in at number 3, it is the Bryan College Regional, College Station Regional. Number 3, Texas A&M coming out of that one. And they get Grambling, Texas, and Louisiana Lafayette. And, obviously storyline there with the A&M versus Texas. For those of you who missed the super regional over the weekend between Texas and Texas A&M, that was a battle. Congrats to the Texas Longhorns moving on, but A&M gave them all they could handle. And they went to a third game of that series. So potential there for a Texas versus Texas A&M showdown in the College Station Regional. We'll keep an eye on that one. All right, so then we've got the number 4 seed North Carolina. That's the Chapel Hill Regional, but LSU's going there as the 2 seed, and LSU is red hot. They just fell short in the SEC championship game or tournament championship against Tennessee, but prior to that, LSU was finding ways to hit, come from behind hits, and they were streaking all week long there in Hoover, and they have been a team that I think won prior to that 4 of their last 5 series to end the season. So they are a red hot team, and a lot of people picking LSU to pull off the upset of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. So we'll see what happens there. Then we've got number 5 seed Arkansas in the Fayetteville Regional. They draw Southeast Missouri State, Kansas State, and Louisiana Tech. I think that is a very navigatable for Arkansas. See if the pitching can show up for them. Number 6 seed Clemson, they will host High Point, Coastal Carolina, and this is where Vanderbilt is headed. So Vanderbilt going to Clemson. I think Vanderbilt got as good a chance as anybody to pull off an upset of Clemson. Then number 7 overall, we've got Georgia. They will host the Athens Regional. They draw Army, Georgia Tech, and UNC Wilmington. Again, all these on paper look like I like Georgia's chances there, but the odds are not all these SEC teams are going to advance. Somebody's going to get upset, but just looking at these draws, I like how these fell. So that's it for the host sites in the SEC. The rest of the teams going on the road. Alabama will go to the Tallahassee Regional to play Florida State. From what I understand, Florida State's got a very good offense. They hit well, but Alabama hits well. So maybe Alabama, if they're going to go in there, pull off an upset, get those bats going and maybe win a shootout. The Norman Regional, well, that'll be Oklahoma. They're not SEC just yet. The Raleigh Regional, that's where South Carolina will go to play number 10 seed NC State. Also, James Madison and Bryant making that regional. So, going to be a tough battle there, but South Carolina, they had some nice wins this past week. Need to clean up the defense. Defense was lacking a little bit this week in Hoover, but South Carolina got a chance there. Stillwater Regional. How about Florida getting in there? See if Florida can go do a little damage and maybe pull off an upset of Oklahoma State. But they're heading to the Stillwater Regional. And then lastly, Mississippi State. They will head to Charlottesville to play number 12 Virginia. Also got Penn and St. John's in that field. And Mississippi State, very bitter, very, very angry because they thought they should have been, you know, one of those last regional host sites, and they were not. So go take out your frustrations and go pull off an upset of Virginia. But if I was just setting odds, I would just say, look, it's going to be tough for Mississippi State to come out of Virginia. It's going to be tough for Florida to come out of Oklahoma State. It's going to be tough for South Carolina to come out of NC State. Tough for Alabama to come out of Tallahassee. Like I said, I think Georgia's got a great chance to win the Athens Regional. You know, I'll give Vanderbilt a good upset chance to go into Clemson and win. I give LSU a good upset chance to go into North Carolina and win. Arkansas should win their home regional, and as should Tennessee, Kentucky, and Texas A&M. But we'll see how it all shakes out. Again, if you missed it the first time, 11 teams from any conference makes NCAA tournament, so the SEC making history there. Tennessee did win over LSU. I mentioned that on Sunday in Hoover to win the SEC tournament. Their lefty reliever Dylan Loy came in and just absolutely shoved. And after dropping their first game of the SEC tournament, the Vols held strong, went to the championship game and won it. It's the 5th conference championship in program history, and the Vols first since 2022 came against the defending national champs in LSU. Now, here's the only tough part for Tennessee, as they won the SEC and get the number 1 overall seed. Only one national seed has won it all at the College World Series. That was the 1999 Miami Hurricanes. So Tony Vitello and Tennessee, they're going to have to buck that trend if they don't want to keep that streak going. But Tennessee Volunteers, the number 1 overall seed, some say it's a little bit of a curse. You really want that. But see if the Vols can make the best of it. By the way, the Lady Vols in softball getting upset by Alabama in the 3rd game of their super regional. So we'll see. Tennessee, you know, basketball made a nice run this year. Softball comes up short. What will the baseball team do? See what Vitello and the boys can do. All right, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. Come on back and check us out. And hey, for your second listen, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's also available on the Amazon Fire TV, in the Fire TV channels app. Check it out. Locked On Sports Today, here for you 24/7, covering all the top sports stories of the day with our local experts. Locked On Sports Today. Check that out right now. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. We will talk to you guys throughout this week, catching up on all the news coming out of Destin at the SEC meetings.